Hello, everyone. I'm Brianna Jonason, the graduate assistant with the Violence Awareness and Response Program. So today I'm joined by Gabby and Aaron for another conversation circle. So today our conversation circle is regarding how to be an advocate in a completely online world. In October 12th, we will have a conversation circle regarding that there's an election coming and kind of just thinking about how are you doing in that. And then November 23rd, we will be discussing virtual holidays and how to safely fulfill our inner needs in this holiday season. So I'm Brianna. I'm the graduate assistant with VARP again. I'm in the Masters of Social Work program.
My name is Gabby. I'm the GA for the LGBT Center. I'm in the Clinical Mental Health Counseling Graduate Program.
And I'm Erin. I am the graduate assistant for the Women's Center, and I am in the master's program for social work also.
So obviously I have these two joining me for a literal conversation versus me lecturing you, which I'm super stoked about. So my hope for today is to have an open and honest and raw conversation about what's happening in our world today. I hope to hit on topics surrounding activism on social media and outside of social media, such as the current call-out culture that we're experiencing, knowing when to speak up on social media and when it's best for ourselves to just disengage and do some self-care, how to do good online, especially when we're surrounded by so much nastiness by the call-out culture, and performative versus engaged activism. And while this is kind of in the same realm, I hope to delve into kind of anti-racism as how do we be an anti-racist? What does that mean? And as engaged activists, how do we respectfully help others identify maybe their biases that's not attacking or judgmental? And of course, privilege. I mean, do we have it? How do we know? And what do we do with it? So obviously, I have these two joining me for a literal conversation versus me lecturing you, which I'm super stoked about. So my hope for today is to have an open and honest and raw conversation about what's happening in our world today. I hope to hit on topics surrounding activism on social media and outside of social media, such as the current call-out culture that we're experiencing, knowing when to speak up on social media and when it's best for ourselves to just disengage and do some self-care, how to do good online, especially when we're surrounded by so much nastiness by the call-out culture, and performative versus engaged activism. And while this is kind of in the same realm, I hope to delve into kind of anti-racism as, how do we be an anti-racist? What does that mean? And as engaged activists, how do we respectfully help others identify maybe their biases that's not attacking or judgmental? And of course, privilege. I mean, do we have it? How do we know? And what do we do with it? So just before we get started, a little disclaimer, if you will. So just speaking for myself, I identify as holding a very large amount of privilege in almost every aspect of my life. So I understand that I cannot speak for anyone else in their experiences, especially those of color. So we're three graduate students who are seeking to engage in these sometimes uncomfortable but very necessary conversations to further our growth and understandings of these topics. Because we are constantly learning and growing and evolving our own thoughts and opinions, and we don't have all the answers, but we do have some ideas. And I think that's what we're here to discuss today. And this is just where we are right now. I mean, like I said, we're always growing, we're always evolving. Not only are we here to talk, but we're here to listen, because real growth and understanding how to be an ally, an advocate, an anti-racist, etc., starts with open and honest communication and compassionate listening. So we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, and I'm ready to begin. So basically, I want to start with call-out culture. That's one thing that was really on my mind before I even started kind of digging into this. I was speaking to Laura, the director of VARP, and I was like, I don't know where to go with it, but I'm stressed out on Facebook. Like, I'm just so stressed, and I want to shut it off, but then I'm like, I can't shut it off because I need to be an advocate, and it just was kind of an endless circle. So she pointed me to this article written by Loretta Ross, who is an expert on women's issues, racism, human rights, and a founder of the reproductive justice theory. So it's called I'm a Black Feminist, and I think call out culture is toxic. There are better ways of doing social justice work. So she starts by identifying call out culture of, it's when people publicly shame each other online, at the office, in classrooms, or anywhere where we just have beef with other people. And she said there's a better way of doing it. It's worse on social media because you can do it, sometimes you can do it anonymously, or other times it's just so much easier to click send versus telling to other people's faces. I was just gonna say, like, it almost makes me scared to even like put my opinions out on Facebook, which then I go into kind of an endless circle of like, no, but I should be an advocate. I should be able to do this. I should, to be silent is to consent. So if I'm not being an advocate, I'm being part of the problem. And it's like my brain just goes like on spin mode.
But also you need to practice your own kind of self-care. Like, you can get exhausted from constantly putting yourself out there like that.
Mm-hmm.
When like faced with all this negativity, sometimes you just need to like step away from it for a bit.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's so difficult with just how divided we are. Where is that line of, is this productive? Is this helpful? Am I advocating in the right way? Or is this just more hurtful for both myself and them? It's really difficult. It's a tough line to navigate. Even just the line of how do we properly discuss these really difficult issues that are going on right now. Like, what are the lines of, what's appropriate, what's not, what are the guidelines? It's just a very divided nation, and how we have these conversations is always, it's tough. It's so tough. There's just so much to it. There's so much gray. It's definitely not black and white.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. She went on in her article, to say like being called out just sucks. Like, even when it's necessary, even when you are helping, I feel hurt, embarrassed, and defensive, even if I'm being called out in the best way possible.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's really possible to grow through our discomfort. But she, went on to discuss, I think it's also really hard today to, see movements, cultures, races, whatever it is, and not interject our one experience onto the entirety of it. She went on to say, like, not every flirtatious man is a potential rapist, and not every, one who challenges my thoughts on racism and this or that, is a Trump supporter or whatever it may be. And I find myself constantly having to check, like, especially political movements, or like if someone has something that doesn't line with me in their front yard, like I can find myself getting very mad, and I'm like, why am I so mad?
Mm-hmm.
I found myself experiencing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the yard signs, you can't even have a casual walk with your dog without having this debate with your partner that you're walking with, or your friend. It's a difficult time for sure. I think it's really important to normalize hearing people's stories without bringing up your own, and really just listening and validating, and then when there is the place of, okay, something's off here, or this perspective is needed in this situation, I think it's important to just kind of be patient on when you insert yourself. Is this the moment? Am I reading this right? Am I, inserting myself at the right moments? Which is a hard question to ask yourself, because you kind of just want to insert yourself at every moment, and who cares, right? Because some people have very different opinions, and it's hard to not insert yourself. But is this going to be beneficial? Is usually what I ask myself before I respond on an Instagram post or Facebook post. Is this going to be a productive, constructive, beneficial conversation for both parties, or am I just trying to convince them? to switch their opinions, because that's not my goal. I'm here to educate. I don't need to convince you. Odds are you're very not convincible. So how can we have a conversation to where you at least get some education?
Yep, that's exactly the standards I go by, Gabby. I try to assess whether it's me being angry or if I want to, if this will actually be like a beneficial conversation of just like two opinions. Instead of a debate, it's a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you both really hit on like what is my intent behind this? Like, and I think honestly, just checking my own mood. Like, am I even like okay enough to have this conversation? Like, will I be a nice person? Like, if I do this, or like, am I just on edge today? You know, like, what are my intentions? Am I trying to convince you, or am I trying to invalidate you? Which, one of my big takeaway from the Women's Center, witnessing my whiteness, was just, my experiences, are fine, but they're not everybody's truth. I have experienced great police officers and this and that, but that doesn't mean that that's everybody's truth. And so I think it's really hard in those moments of when I'm trying to engage with others to not invalidate them and their experiences.
Sometimes that just means listen, right? I mean, a lot of times as a society, we listen to respond and not to hear. And a lot of times these individuals just want to be listened to. I mean, we've already inserted ourselves enough. We've already talked over them. We've already oppressed them. Let's just listen. We don't need to. Sometimes it's not about having the perfect response, and rather just having an opening ear and some empathy and really just opening the floor for them and their story and their truth, like you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. I think, we already hit on it, but because we're so politically split right now, because we're coming up on an election, because 2020 has been so trying in every aspect, what do you guys think? Are we evolving, or are we hurting, our ability to handle conflicts with each other? I mean, we kind of touched on it, but just curious your thoughts.
Yeah, that's a great question. Aaron, do you have something to say right away on that?
I'm like trying to think, because I want to say we are evolving, but also because we have this new social media, like, because we've all like had the same kind of conversation for years since the beginning of civilization, I feel like. But now we have social media as an aspect, and we can reach and talk to anybody in the world at any given time. We have more purpose to like educate others. Mm-hmm. And people have more access to educate themselves too.
Mm-hmm. I think, it just all depends on how you define evolving. Because in my opinion, no. Our suicide rates have increased. We have more people in substance abuse treatment this year than we have in decades. Overdose rates have increased by 36%. So in regard to mental health and substance use, I would say absolutely not. I think especially the pandemic and just our overall division in the world has definitely put people in even more isolation. And I think as Americans, we already isolate so much. So in that sense, 100% not, we're not evolving. But then I look at like what we're doing right now, like having this conversation, wanting change, striving to implement that change, having these open and difficult conversations. We're just, three people in our 20s, trying our best. And I'm hopeful that there's a lot of other 3 groups of 20-year-olds that are trying to put their best foot forward. And I'm sure there are. So in that sense that we're evolving, and then in other senses we're not. So I think it's kind of just all over the place.
Yeah, it's definitely more acceptable to have these kinds of conversations nowadays, I feel like.
You both, I feel like, challenged my original answer. in like your guys' answers. I mean, I totally, so my initial answer was, are we evolving? And I almost said no. Because in a way I'm like, woohoo, we have a voice. Like we are learning to have opinions, like
Right.
educating ourselves, whether it's, aligning with my beliefs or, what else. It's like at least we're forming opinions, but it's almost like our delivery, I almost maybe, are we evolving? I don't know. But then I really liked, Gabby, what you said, because, especially for, us three in our 20s, college age students, like we are still trying to find our identity, what we believe with, what we align in. And I think the only way that that truly grows is through having these conversations of like, what do I believe? Like asking ourselves these tough, important questions of, when I see someone walk down the street, what do I think? What do I feel? Like, I don't know. And the only way we do that is through these conversations. And I agree, Gabby. I hope that these conversations are more widespread. It's obvious that in this 3-person group, we all look the same, whether, that's how we identify or not. I mean, we are missing some diversity, but we're trying. And I'm really, really thankful that you two joined me in this call so we can at least try.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say that we didn't reach out for more diverse voices, and I want to highlight that too. But unfortunately, all of our schedules are crazy, right?
Yes, online school.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go back to that article. She went on to say that, being an activist isn't, cussing out people online or, simply just going to a protest and calling people out. But it's actions. And that's really kind of hard right now. And that's, in my own life made me really think of like, what good can I really do if I'm just sitting in my apartment, if I'm, what do I do? And she kind of went on to state, different aspects of doing good. And I think, it made me think of my own life of, what can I do? There's the Women's Center. Erin, I don't know if you want to touch on that. I know there's 2 more coming. Do you want to name those quick?
Yeah, the Getting It White series. One of them, I know on the 22nd, that one that comes to mind to me right now is Activism Out of the Armchair, which is pretty much how to advocate from online. And the other one, I'm going to quick look that up.
No problem.
It's on the 1st of October. I know. And it's about systematic complicity, where we look on examining the systems that like uphold whiteness and oppress blackness, and learn more about white supremacy and the way that we can like more actively work to dismantle it.
Yeah, I mean, just through, those 3, those are free, those are local, those are right here, those are options to grow our understandings and, partner with things already on campus, with people already on campus. 2020, COVID, it's kind of a blessing in the sense that we have a lot available to us from home. There's so many different webinars and, different conferences that we can engage in, or, even just starting these small conversations with those that are around you, I think is huge. But I don't know. How do you guys feel? Because I've kind of felt a little bit of, what can I do right now? How can I be part of the solution?
Definitely what I do is I post a lot on social media about my opinions and share facts of things people don't really know about anti-racism or just any system that affects marginalized groups, like for Black Lives Matter, it strives on online activism, I think, because that's how it started. We didn't have a widespread knowledge that Black people were being killed by the police at such a high rate until we had social media to more spread that information and get and film evidence of it happening.
Right.
So I don't think it's just pointless because you can't actively go outside, because I think social media is what started it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think like I'm doing very similar things, you know, doing like the promoting and talking about it and having conversations on Instagram and social media. But as I sit here and reflect on that question, I am still trying to figure that out. You know, I'm still trying to figure out what it looks like to advocate, to have these hard conversations in a pandemic world. I'm still also learning how to virtually connect, because a lot of students, especially the population that the LGBT Center works with, is, you know, they struggle with body dysmorphia, body image, you know, the gender identity. Like, they don't want to be on Zoom, and I totally understand that. You know, so it's how do we virtually connect? How do we virtually advocate? I think we're all trying to figure that out. I feel like these last 7 months have felt like a really long time, but it's still not a long time to answer those questions and to figure those things out. And if this is going to continue any longer, which it will, I think eventually we'll start to have those answers. I know my one answer to that is I'm definitely not doing enough. And I try not to get so hard on myself for that, but I definitely do. So I think I want to have that awareness that I'm not doing enough, and I want to just keep figuring out how I can virtually connect, how I can virtually advocate. But I'm trying to figure it out still.
Yeah, and I think it's really important, you know, especially with this conversation of, you know, call out culture, because, you know, a lot of times it can be very ineffective. I mean, it can be just sometimes just like ruthless hazing of people. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it can make people not want to post, not want to, you know, speak out or be an ally, because I don't want to be targeted. And people, you know, can avoid having those meaningful conversations because there's these people who know it all and they're perfectionists, and, you know, they thrive off of that. There was I gotta find it quick. There was this quote she used that said, "Never wrestle with a pig. You both get dirty, and besides, the pig likes it."
Mm-hmm.
And it says one of the best ways to make a point is to ignore someone begging for attention. And that's something, you know, Gabby, I think it's, you know, really awesome of you to point out. You know, I don't know, I'm still figuring it out. It sometimes stresses me out, because that's something that I too am still learning of. When do I engage? When do I not? You know, is this going to drain me? Is this going to, you know, take a couple days for me to like recuperate? You know, then maybe it's not worth engaging. You know, is this someone that I think is going to be open-minded? Then maybe go for it, you know. But like I said, it kind of goes back to the, you know, I think, you know, to be silent is to consent. But then I, you know, sometimes go, you know, well, then I should be able to do this. I should.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, Erin's point in the beginning was, you know, you got to make time to self-care, because if you don't, can you really be effective?
Mm-hmm.
That was good.
Yeah, you brought up a really good point too. Like, do I have the emotional capacity to have this conversation? You know, I mean, we're all humans trying to do our best, and you know, I think it's safe to say that you know, we all struggle with some form of mental health, and you know, engaging in those conversations sometimes can hurt that and make it worse and get you in a funk. You know, so really analyzing yourself and having that self-awareness of, do I have the emotional capacity, or can I push myself, you know, a little bit today? So yeah, it's hard, because then it's like, I don't care if I'm depressed, I want to shut them up. You know, it's a weird balance. It really is.
And I think one thing that is really important, and one of the big things I learned from witnessing my whiteness, is, you know, performative versus engaged activism, which can be so hard in an online world, you know, whereas performative activism is more so doing good so that you can be recognized as looking good. So others can see that. So it's more being more concerned about your image versus, actively working to help oppressed community.
Totally. Using the movements as like a little hashtag publicity stunt so that you look cool and educated.
Yeah. And that's one of the ways that I'm still trying to figure out is how do I present on social media in a way that I don't look like that? And not, but then it's the end of the cycle. I'm like, am I worrying about how much I look? It's like, but how do I actually do good? How do I be part of the solution? How do I be an engaged activist in an online world? Because I agree, the conversation definitely starts online. That's an easy and that's a great way. But then how do I live it? And that's something I'm still working on. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on that.
Yeah.
So you can always lobby with your local politicians by calling and writing them letters and bugging them. Because that's what they're there for. They're here to work for you. And and if they don't know what's important to you until you tell them, then they're the ones that can actively help change policies and laws that can help with whatever. Like, I know a big thing right now is we're trying to get rid of conversion therapy in Mankato. How do we activate for that and advocate for those who are trans in our community or have experience with not experience, that's not the right word, but have body dysmorphia, and how do we support those individuals online? Because we can't always do it in person right now, but definitely you can, I know there's petitions and you can, again, lobby with your local government for what you want. Sorry, I'm really bad with words today.
No, you're all good. You're doing great. I think the first thing that came to mind is like cultural competency. And the only way that I feel like I can personally ever get to that point is by having conversations with those individuals directly, so that could be, there's a queer Black student in the LGBT sector, having like close conversations with them, about their experiences and just listening and validating. I feel like I just try my best to immerse myself in situations to approach those individuals that would normally not be approached, such as Black individuals. I approach, I just immerse, I start conversations in a of course safe way and 6 feet apart. But like, for example, I attend, and Aaron was there too, attended the Pride March and Rally for South Central. And I met up with a bunch of students, and then I saw some students and saw some students that also looked different than me. And I just immersed myself in that situation right there and just sparked a conversation. How are you feeling? It can just be even as simple as that. So I just have been really trying to get uncomfortable, and get comfortable being uncomfortable and ask questions directly to them. I think right now, even like we're missing some parts, and I think it's important to go and get those and have genuine conversations about their experiences, because we will never, ever, ever be able to relate. So yeah, I feel like that's like, the only way that you can have education is really, personally for me, is just by getting it from them directly, by queer students, by Black students, by trans students, just directly. I want to hear from them. I want to hear from them.
Yeah. I agree. I think one thing, to build off of that is, I can't remember who said it in the Witnessing My Whiteness, but I've, heard it and seen it a couple different times is, obviously I can't speak on this topic, but just relaying that message of, sometimes I think what I've heard from people of color is like, I don't always want to be your educator. Can you like educate yourself, through different online outlets. Like it's exhausting and tiring, and I can't even imagine to have to always be, you know, your token Black friend that has to educate you on my issues. And like these are my
That's a great point.
like that was one thing that really struck my head too, because I'm just like you, Gabby. I'm like, I wanna know, I wanna talk. But
Yeah.
if everyone in their life, you know, is wanting to constantly peel their layers and hear from them, you know, I'm sure that is exhausting. That just struck me sideways. I'm like, yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's a wonderful point. I'm sure that can be so annoying and emotionally draining, and it's kind of like, go get yourself educated. But it's difficult because on the flip side, you know, I just want to make sure I'm getting the right information. You know, it's like I worry I'm not going to become as culturally competent as I could be. You know, and I just want to reach that point where I can be. I'm never going to be perfectly culturally competent, though. I got to stop striving for that. It's just not going to happen.
Good to strive for. I totally agree. Sorry, Erin. That, you know, like it's gonna, for me, for sure, because I hold so much privilege, it is going to be an ongoing thing for the rest of my life. And I hope I never have the mindset of, you know, I'm completely culturally competent, I don't need to keep learning anymore, you know?
Yeah.
Because it is always an ongoing thing, and I won't always know, and that's okay. You know, one of the things that was hit up again in the Witnessing My Whiteness is, you know, should I feel ashamed for being white? And I mean, you guys can also build off of that. You know, I think no, but recognizing what that means, what that holds, and going forth with that solution, you know? I don't know. Erin, I interrupted you.
Going back, I was gonna say, like, the way I approach those kinds of like personal questions is I ask if like, is it okay if I ask you about this topic, and it's okay if you don't want to answer. And I'm trying to ask it in the most kind way I know, but I don't mean any offense. But also, you can feel free to call me out and not even want to answer the question if you don't want to, because that's your information. I'm not obligated to it.
Right. Yeah. Permission. It's important in every avenue. So, you know, I think that is a great point of just, you know, can I ask you this? Is this okay? And if not, please do tell.
Yeah. We've been discussing this without actually discussing this, but I want to get to the point of, you know, what does it mean to be anti-racist? So I think the anti, you know, means action, actively being against racism. You know, having a voice and having the courage to stand up to things that are racist. And that's one of the things that for me is easier when I'm here in Mankato, when I'm here, you know, at the college or surrounded by, you know, my college friends, versus when I go back home to my small, rural, very white Minnesota community is, you know, how do I stand up to people? Not even stand up to people. I don't even know if I worded that correctly, but you know, how do I advocate respectfully? How do I be a voice? How do I be the change? You know, how do I be anti-racist? Helping, you know, educate others, you know, on what's going on in other communities.
Yeah.
Well, you first be the change by educating yourself on your privileges and how your privilege can oppress others, even without you even like really realizing it, or how might necessarily be your privilege, but someone who looks just like you also has that same privilege, and there's also privilege in identities other than race, like gender and sex and class and age and religion, and how to address that, and like recognizing that sometimes you are going to be in a place of privilege.
Can I swear?
Go for it.
Okay, I won't say the F word. I feel like that's just like ugh. But the first thing that came to mind is telling Uncle Ricky's drunk ass to stop making stupid racial slurs that he thought was funny in the 60s, right? We're over that shit. So I feel like it starts with, you know, within your own family systems of like, what's messed up in here, because it's a lot. I mean, I know for my own family system, we had a lot of messed up shit. And, you know, me and my sister have just started to call out the really inappropriate commentary that isn't cool for our generation. We're not doing that shit anymore. You know, we're not in that generation. This is a totally different world, a more accepting world, a more open dialogue world. And so I feel like cutting that kind of stuff off and correcting it and saying, you know, we don't say that stuff anymore. It's not nice. It's not respectful. And you surely wouldn't say that in your local Walmart. So don't be saying it here. I feel like that's really important and a good starting point, especially if you're kind of just figuring out like, where do I stand? How do I be, you know, anti-racist? I think it really starts within your own little circles, you know, and educating, because that's where you're in the most, and then it can branch out. So I think in terms of a good starting point, a good foundation is there for sure.
Yeah, with Thanksgiving coming up in like a month or so, that's got to prepare for that.
Yeah, let's just say Uncle Ricky will not be showing up.
Yeah, I think you hit on too, which again, we haven't explicitly hit on this yet, but we've been talking about it, you know, privilege. Do either of you, I can as well, but do either of you want to hit on what is privilege?
Yeah, you're looking at it. Whoever's watching this.
Right.
I think it's such a heavy question. I think the definition can also be totally different for every single person. And I think that's important to keep in mind. But awareness, like we have to be aware that we have it. And just like continuing to educate ourselves on a bunch of different topics that are important, continuing to educate ourselves on our privilege is extremely important too. And how do we use it in a productive way? Which again, like my questions of how to find virtual connection, that's my same question. How do I use my privilege in the right way? And I think each day I'm doing little steps that hopefully matters. And I hope that I can have a better understanding of that as I continue to grow and develop and learn.
Yeah, privilege I feel is just like something like an advantage or something most people don't even think about it because they don't realize that they only think of like their experience, and that's how they will think that the average white person will experience. So like me as a white person, I have the privilege of like just getting in my car and driving without the fear of being stopped by the police for no random reason. While I have talked to a person of color and they said they were scared of being pulled over by the police, and they always had to make sure that their wallet with their ID, driver's license, was right next to them. That was a fear that they just always had to have, and I had the privilege of just not ever considering that.
I think, you know, it's important to realize that privilege is having me just different advantages in life that I have not earned. I have done nothing to be deserving of these advantages I've had, but simply they just are. And I think it can be hard for us to confront, you know, the different privileges we've had, because it can almost feel like it's taking away from, you know, my successes maybe, you know, but it's there. You know, it doesn't matter. It's as simple as, you know, I can go to Walmart and I can get a Band-Aid that looks almost exactly like my skin, but that's not true for everyone. I mean, we hit on that too. You know, I think different races have completely different views of policing. You know, I've had nothing but pleasant experiences, but in witnessing my whiteness, you know, Vice President Morris had a statement, got to find it, you know, the histories of policing, you know, as a white person, you know, they've been there to serve and protect. But as someone of color, you know, he shared, you know, the history, you know, behind, you know, lynching and a broken judicial system. Many people of color, you know, their last dying sight is, you know, a person in uniform. And they're not there to help, but or advocate, but they've been there, you know, to make sure that nothing interferes with their death. And I thought that was just like, oh my gosh, so powerful. I didn't even think about that because I haven't had to think about that. You know, I can go throughout my day without having to think of race at all. You know, I can go and do whatever I want and I don't even have to worry about it. And like that is an incredible privilege in itself.
Yeah, you can go running at night. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I think of the neighborhood I grew up in. If all the white kids got pulled over, they would be in just a rude awakening, immersed in the jail systems, serving prison time for 5th-degree possessions. They absolutely would have been, but it wasn't. It was the black individuals. That was who was being put in prisons and jails. And if they would have pulled over white kids, that's who would have also been going. But we're not pulling white kids over, and if we do, they just get away with it. You know, it's
Not at the same rate.
so frustrating.
It's not seen as dangerous. They're just seen as having a good time.
Right, and privilege is not having fear. Really.
That's
Yeah.
I don't remember who said this from the Witnessing My Whiteness again, but privilege is acknowledging someone else's history and story as true to them, even if it's not true to you. Your truth is not the ultimate truth. And further, you know, privilege is being able to control the narrative and how it's just so important to, you know, not invalidate others and their experiences just because I've never experienced it. You know, it's such a hot topic right now, policing. But like I said, you know, I have had great experiences. I have had, you know, my hometown, the police are great, you know, but that's not to say that elsewhere this isn't a problem. Or maybe even in, you know, my same area, you know, someone else that doesn't look like me maybe had very different experiences. And for me to say, you know, no, they're great because this, and that is so invalidating. And even just like a simple comment like that, you know, I have to check myself of, you know, oh, did I invalidate? You know, and then being able to just, you know, own my crap of saying that was a little gross what I just said, and just being honest and apologizing and owning it, you know, but doing it in a way that doesn't steal the show, you know, that doesn't make it seem like now you have to comfort me, but that it's about me, because it's not about me. You know, all of history has been about me.
Yeah.
You can't really talk about privilege and oppression without bringing up intersectionality.
Yeah.
That term was coined by a Black woman, Kimberly Crenshaw, about Black women's experiences. A main point, how or intersectionality is like how systems of oppression and privilege, I guess, are always intersecting with each other. So I know it was brought up like as an example once where this Black woman wasn't hired at her job, and she thought it was because she was a Black woman, but they were like, no, we have Black men who work here and women who work here, but didn't really see, and so we're not racist or sexist, but also they weren't acknowledging that they didn't hire her because she was Black, a woman, which are two marginalized groups, and they had that different experience because of that. For me, as a white woman, is going to have a different experience than a Black woman going about my day, going grocery shopping.
Totally.
That's a great point.
You know, one of the other things that I just can't really wrap my head around is like, why are we fighting this? You know,
Yeah, why is it a debate?
being anti-racist, having equity, you know, not just equality, but you know, this benefits everybody. Like, I just don't get it. And that's okay because I'm learning and growing, but you know, that's just something right now. I'm just like, but yeah, exactly, Gabby. Like, why are we arguing about like what? This doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
And those are the people that believe all lives matter. And like I said, you know, are we just trying to convince them because they're probably not convincible? And I am just so hopeful for our generation, because a lot of times, and this is just in my experiences, those types of people that are all lives matter, you know, don't take my privilege away, are just a totally different generation than myself. And so I'm just super hopeful that that is not going to be our tone in 20 years because of just how we're having these conversations now. But that might be totally ignorant. You know, that could be a totally ignorant statement of like, let's have hope, we're going to be the change. But I don't know. Yeah, I can't stand it. I don't know why we're arguing about it. I don't get it.
Yeah, I don't know either, because all lives matter. It's only coined after Black Lives Matter is used. Like, yes, all lives matter, but we're focusing on the Black lives because obviously they don't matter to the systems of oppression they're constantly being oppressed and face so many, especially by the police. They're being killed, and and the murderers who murder them, they just get away with it because they're police, because they're in a system of power. They're white men, the most privileged identities of all.
Yeah, I've seen this quote all over Facebook, so I'm sure you're both familiar with it, but I don't think that all lives can matter until Black lives do, right? I'm sure you all read that. So that's why we're focusing on it. It's important. All lives don't matter. Like, no, that is not a thing. That is not what we're moving towards. That is not the action that we're trying to implement. You know, that can't ever be true until this other component is true, right? Like, everything has to matter, and that's just not the tone right now.
Yeah, you know, I think it's just important to note that, you know, all lives do matter. Exactly. Like that's what we're advocating for, you know, but saying that just completely invalidates a movement that is working, you know, to build up our Black community, you know, to empower, to advocate for, you know, you're right, all lives matter. And that's why we're doing this. And I think, you know, it's sad to see, you know, one image of an entire movement, you know, of looting or this and that, you know, to be the face of it, to say that, you know, the entire movement is based off of actions of very few, you know, it's frustrating and it's saddening because it's not true. And that's
what the media captures, really, though, is if it bleeds, it leads, is what they call, yeah. But since most protests are peaceful, they're not getting really coverage on that. All people see are the violent ones.
I think on the flip side too, and maybe I'm just extremely liberal, I'd be angry too. I mean, I would be breaking windows. I would be pissed off too. There's a part of me that absolutely has empathy for that. And can understand the looting. I would be just as angry. Target is replaceable, not Black individuals. You know, I don't care about our community, you know, Target not thriving. And maybe that is just way out of left field, but I have so much empathy in my heart that I can't not have empathy for those individuals as well. Because, you know, maybe some of it isn't totally genuine, but I have to believe that they're angry and they're doing this out of years and years of oppression.
And I think most, you know, yes, we would all prefer for it not to happen. I think almost everyone would prefer that. I mean, but I think as me, as someone who has a ton of privilege, I think it's very hard for me to tell you what to do with the trauma that people like me have caused you.
Absolutely.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
that's very invalidating, and it's just not my place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, kind of want to transition into, you know, we can say we want to strive towards cultural competence, or that, you know, we are welcoming and any other words we want to use, you know, but we still have biases. And I think everyone from time to, well, I don't want to overly generalize, but I think many, you know, from time to time, we will have racist thoughts. And I don't know that we can ever completely turn that off, because we are kind of living in a world that conditions us to initially believe them from the beginning. But I think our thoughts after that are so important. You know, do I check myself? Do I realize, like, oh, I'm thinking something that's not, you know, that's not what I believe. And then what do I do about that? So I don't know. How do you guys think, like, how do you work through your own biases? Hard question.
Yeah, I think just, you know, an everyday journey of self-awareness, and just, you know, like taking a step back and asking, when I have those biases that come up, just like, where is this coming from? You know, what triggered this?
Mm-hmm.
Because I've noticed that sometimes I'll have biases that come up that I didn't even know I had. And I'll really try to identify, you know, what was triggered by that. You know, did I have a past experience that maybe this person was wearing that same color shirt? Maybe it's not even the color of their skin, or what they're wearing, you know, or whatever. I think just identifying where that trigger came from is important, and the self-awareness. I think too, and this has been a conversation I've been having with a lot of just my family and friends, of, you know, even as someone who identifies in the LGBT community and someone who has a lot of knowledge about it, I'm constantly seeking more. I will never ever assume that I am, you know, the most educated person when it comes to being a lesbian. Like, I'm not. There's always so much to learn. So even when you know your biases, dig a little bit more. You know, let's just dig a little bit more in that. Let's gain a little bit more knowledge. You're not perfectly educated on the biases that exist, and you also are going to have so many more that pop up. So what triggered those?
Huge.
Yeah, pretty much what Gabby said was what my thoughts were. Like, and identify why you're feeling biases and kind of take a step back. And I would try to approach everybody with kindness, no matter what. They say to just kill them with kindness. Not actually kill, but
Just to piggyback on that too, I noticed I was engaging in a conversation with a coworker, and we were talking about something that was a little bit of a heavier topic, much like we're having right now. And she said, "I'm not going to engage in this conversation. I just don't have that energy," which basically meant, you know, like, fuck you, you're wrong. And even that, right? Like, okay, she gave me the pleasure of not engaging in this conversation so we can both go on with our day. But it was so condescending. And I think she meant to be genuine, but it came off really mean. So with that kindness, you know, maybe don't say, I'm just not gonna have this conversation because your mind's not changeable. I think it's really just, you know, silence, or, you know, thank you for your thoughts, you know, nothing further. Like, there doesn't need to be any condescending way of like, I'm going to shut this up, or I'm going to educate you. You know, I think it's really important to be mindful of how you're either exiting the situation or how you're advocating, whatever it may be. Because sometimes the kindness, what you think you're saying to exit the situation or come in, can really just be super condescending, you know, without intending to be.
You hit on something that, you know, is very similar to call out culture, which is, you know, cancel culture of if you just don't think or believe the way I do, then I'm just not going to engage with you.
Yeah.
You know, totally surrounding yourself with only like-minded people.
Yeah.
And when I read that, it made me check myself because, I mean, since George Floyd's murder, I have unfriended probably 10 people on Facebook.
Oh my gosh. I thought you were going to say like 10,000.
Oh, no, 10. But, you know, I was like, oh my gosh, am I guilty of this? Like, am I only surrounding myself with like-minded people? Like, I was like, OMG. But, you know, just thinking further about my reasonings, you know, why I don't think so. It was more so like so far on the opposite of my views to the point of like actively causing harm in every single Facebook post that I was just like, this is just not healthy for me. Like, it is
Sick.
ruining my mood for so long after I see that. I was like, this just isn't healthy, that I just needed to completely just, you have the freedom of speech, but not on my feed. But it makes me think about that, you know, because then that's another privilege is I have the ability to just be like, okay, turn off. I don't know. It just makes me think.
Yeah, that's a really great point. I definitely know some people in my life that will only surround themselves with like-minded people and then make assumptions over and over and over about people that aren't like-minded. And that can really be harmful, right? Because we, you know, putting everybody in a box and categorizing them just isn't helpful, especially when it comes to advocating and getting educated.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Do you guys have any final thoughts? Kind of just on all the topics we have talked about thus far before
I don't think I have any thoughts. I just very much appreciate the honest conversation and being able to engage in these types of conversations. Like I said, like I'm striving for virtual connection and I feel like I kind of did it today. So what's up? Kind of happy about that.
How do I like keep growing? You know, that's one thing that I'm like kind of obsessed about. It's like,
yeah,
I'm obsessed with self-growth, and sitting here with you guys today has made me grow. So I'm very thankful that like you all agreed to do this too. Also, just, you know, especially while we're on campus, little plug for VARP, you know, we're always here to advocate, to empower, to educate. And Laura, the director of the Violence Awareness and Response Program, and I are available on email, Zoom, phone call, whatever you're comfortable with.
I know Laura's a confidential advocate. Are you, Brianna, too?
I am not yet, no.
Not yet? Okay.
Part of that, good point. Laura is a confidential advocate, which means that she is not required to share what you say with her. So she is an amazing start. She can connect you with resources, as can I, as can the Women's Center, as can the LGBT Center. We're all there to educate and support and advocate as well. Do you guys have any final thoughts on that? Anything we've discussed?
Oh my gosh, I feel like I could sit at this dang Zoom call and talk for like 6 hours about these topics. They were really good talking points to process together, and hopefully as you know this conversation circle progresses for you, Brianna, we can get some more diverse voices. That's always the goal, to partake in these types of conversations.
Yeah. Like I said, none of us are experts. We are not saying that our experiences are true or our opinions are facts.
No, we are totally uneducated. Like we're uneducated to get educated, right? Like we're trying to ask questions and get knowledge. Like I am constantly saying totally uneducated. Like, even if I feel really strong in a certain area, I just don't feel like I'm at the point where I can say, like, I'm totally educated on this topic. Even when I brought up the, you know, just being a part of the LGBT community, I don't feel like I can totally talk for every single person, you know, like I am totally uneducated and more than willing to learn for sure. So no, not experts.
And it's
at all.
okay to say that you don't know or you don't have enough information to really have an opinion yet. I know, like, people will be like, well, how do you feel about what's happening here? And I'll be like, this is the first I'm hearing about it. I need to learn and read up about it before I can really stage an opinion about it.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of power in what we don't know if we're willing to learn. So again, just like, yeah, like what Erin mentioned, like just say you don't know, you know, you're gonna learn something new that day, and don't claim that you know. There's something cool about that, you know. If you're uneducated, that's good. Let's teach. Let's have these conversations.
I think, yeah, you both, you know, hit on, you know, the beauty of learning and having an open mind and being willing to have these conversations and having the humility to say, like, I just don't know. I don't know yet. But then what are you going to do about it? You know, how will I educate myself? Because, you know, activism is an action. You know, being anti-racist, being an advocate, you know, those are all doing. Those are verbs, you know. So I really appreciate you guys helping me learn and helping me grow throughout this whole conversation.
Ditto.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, I will stop our recording and just ask that check out our next conversation circle, which is October 12th, discussing that there's an election coming and how are you doing? Thank you guys.